people, I spoke to my coach yesterday about exactly that topic that we're going to talk about today, is these fear of doing something because of fear itself, right? And how it really, how it puts a blockade into you, and you freeze for a while because there's just a potential fear that sits with you that is maybe not even realistic, but it's there, right?
Yeah, fear is such a huge energy in the world right now. It really is. I think a lot of people, and I think we alluded on this when we last spoke, there's a lot of people, because of all the systems and the structures and that were designed to keep us safe and to give us security, have all but collapsed, or certainly starting to hurt us. People are like, well, what's next? And they're having to go inside and find those resources with themselves. And that's where the fear comes from. There's nothing more scary than the journey to the self, to actually having to realize, who am I?
And it's also the whole rise of uncertainty that is around everywhere, right? It's just like that you can't make certain predictions. No, you can, if you look at business planning, budget planning, but even as private persons, right? You can't even predict if you go on a holiday, to these little things already. So that the feeling of losing control about a major part of your life, and then to refocus on what we have discussed, what do I can control at the moment, and how I gonna gain that control that I can have, and somehow use it in my day-to-day life to keep some sort of structure into it, and some sort of confidence in what's to come, knowing that there is still an uncertain part that I can't control. I think that's really tough for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. And Michael, that kind of brings me quite nicely to the concept of resilience, which is what I'm focusing a lot on this week. When in my content and my work, I usually choose a part of, or a topic that I am particularly interested in. This week, I'm focusing on resilience, and exactly on that point. The reason that I've chosen to focus on this week, and probably for the next couple of months actually, is when we live in a world where uncertainty is the ruling principle, that also presents an equal and probably larger amount of opportunity for people. But in order to lean into that opportunity and have the courage, and this comes back to fear, we have to really lean into sort of deep, true resilience and use it as a creative resource, rather than the way that most people use it today, which is the ability to bounce back, being hardy, being tough, and it's more of a defensive, protective resource. And that's something that's really important to me, because I might have mentioned the power of 9. I mean, when we first chatted last week, we ran through that turbulence audit as a tool, and I wasn't ready to talk about the power of 9, which I am now. I've just launched it as a Facebook group, and I'm going to start to bring it into LinkedIn. The power of the 9 is a behavioral transformation system that clears the path for people to live with the power of deep inner calm, their deepest authenticity, and resilience, which for me are the 3 things that are going to be so essential if we're going to move forward in amongst all this uncertainty, which I think we should expect to be around for quite a few years yet as things settle. And resilience is kind of the meta, one of the meta upsides of doing that. So I'm interested. So what does resilience mean to you? And I asked this question on a number of Facebook groups yesterday, and some of the answers were extraordinary. But what in sort of 1 or 3 or 4 words, what does resilience mean to you?
It has changed over the years. And I think you just truly understand what resilience means for you if you are in moments of struggle. Because if you look into your day-by-day business, when everything goes more or less smooth and normal, I think you don't think so much about it. It's just you're just living your life. But if you are truly hit by a tragic, and it can, that it can be things like, for me, losing my job. For people, it can be death, what happened over the year. Obviously, it can be insecurity in terms of your business. It can be financial insecurity. So when there's some event that shakes your life, where you're out of a sudden getting into an area of grayness, of uncertainty, and where you have not an immediate control over the immediate outcome, that's, I think, where resilience kicks in or not. That's where I believe that when you still have an understanding about who you are, what's important to you in life, what are your values, and then you go through these time of struggle and uncertainty, it's very easy to lose track about yourself. That's what I figured out last year. And I said to a friend of mine a couple of days ago, I can understand why people have or could say at some point, I fell off the cliff because I couldn't manage these tragic or these uncertain times. So that's for me is resilience, is really to have a bigger picture about yourself, about your values in your life and mind. And even though when you are struggling, to not lose sight of that. And
yeah, I think you're right, and I love your answer, because a lot of the feedback that I've got recently, it's all been around this concept of bouncing back and being able to keep going regardless of knockbacks. And the thing that interests me about resilience, because I am somebody that I learned resilience the wrong way and the hard way, and I had to fundamentally change my belief around what resilience was, to really allow myself to allow its true power in, because because of the experiences that I've been through, and I guess a lot of people have gone through, my story is no more remarkable than anybody else's, but I kind of built a very strong, hard outer layer, very hardy, very tough, impenetrable, which ultimately made me quite unavailable emotionally to a lot of people. But it wasn't until I realized that actually, and do you know what it was? It's a quote, and I can't remember the exact time it found me, but it's something that I've written down and I think about a lot. And that's that a kite rises in the wind. And when I heard that, it kind of just completely just cracked my entire concept of what resilience was. And I shifted from it something being a protective and defensive resource to bounce back from adversity, to actually a graceful, creative resource that allows us to surrender to the possibilities that sit in every moment of challenge and adversity. And when I went through that distinction, that's kind of when resilience became a bit of a mission for me, because it completely changed my life. But going back to what you said, embedded in that is that moment, is that power of self-awareness, and that power of knowing who you are, knowing in your values, and knowing that when things are tough, you can rely on your inner resources to get through it. So actually what it does for me, I mean, the Oxford Dictionary defined resilience as the capacity to bounce back from adversity. But I just think that's one of the many benefits. True resilience for me, and why it's important to my work, is because it makes having to bounce back obsolete. So no matter what you're going through, you can fall off the cliff. Yeah. You can have all the cataclysmic events, but you can go through them and experience in a way that actually I don't need to bounce back from this. It's just something I'm going through, and I'll have a nice soft landing, and I'm going to learn for it, and it's going to nourish me, and I'm going to come back bigger, better, and stronger. And I think that's quite an exciting insight.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I remember in my earlier life when they were always also saying like, well, you have to fail to really learn and this kind of stuff, and you have to make an experience, you have to experience, right? And I always was a bit like, yeah, okay, fine, that's a nice one for a quote for a presentation or something. But the truth is for me that I had a few life-changing moments, right? A marriage that failed, and living in another country that didn't really work out, the thing that happened to me in the last 1.5 years ago. And they were always connected to obviously a time of uncertainty and where things unraveled. And I think what we humans do in those kind of moments is that there are several things we do that I have learned that I wouldn't call them a mistake, but I think they're just humans. First of all, we think the moment we are in, or the thought we are having, is forever, right? So you think, I'm thinking this right now, so that's what it is. That's going to be my ongoing life. But it's just a moment, it's a thought.
Permanent and all pervasive, the two Ps, exactly. Yeah.
And then the self-talk we are giving ourselves in those times of crisis, because we are the most vulnerable in this, it can be enormously damaging. but it's still there, right? And then there's, I think for me, there was also a tendency sometimes to shut down, to shut people out for a while, because I was just so uncertain about myself. I was ashamed, those kind of things. But with this kind of isolation, you make the problem bigger, because it allows. It doesn't allow you to talk to other people and maybe listen to some people who see something in you that you can't see in this moment, right? Because they have some distance to your problem, right? That you don't have because you're emotionally entangled with it. But what I've also experienced at the end, when you go through this, and when you create a certain set of self-awareness about yourself, in this period of time, when you really, I was writing down stuff. I was really spending long walks to understand why I'm here. What's the things I truly enjoy? What are my values? But also, like when you're procrastinating about the worst case scenarios, right? So what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that can happen? And when you then think about it and give yourself the time to work through it, and maybe also when I'm a big fan of reaching out for help, right? I think coaching is enormously important. If you have another problem, therapy can be really, really important and helpful. But when you go through this, from my experience, out of these 3 times, I always came out better and a much more happier person. And I say that as someone who was sitting here 4 months ago with this, and got called out by one of my best friends, who said to me, like, you know what, that right now was 10 months. No one is going to hang around with a sad ass who is sorry for himself.
Michael, I have to say,
that was a hard advice, one of the best advice I got. And yeah.
There's so much. There's so much wisdom and value for people listening to that story, because what I think what I pick up from that is I'm talking about now curiosity. So I just to frame this a little bit, I like to coach and teach resilience on the basis of 4 C's: curiosity, control, competence, and commitment. We can go into those a little bit later. It's a framework for thinking. And what you just described there is moving from interrogation, which then is looking for blame and culprits, usually within yourself, that self-talk, and that kind of then you shrink and you become isolated and you push people away. And then through the story, you then moved into deep curiosity, which is a completely different energy. It's looking for meaning and answers, and it's just a completely different, creative, softer, self-empathetic energy around it. And I think that's the most important lesson I think you could give to anybody that's going through a tough time, is all of us will inevitably fall into self-interrogation at times, okay? But to remember that if you can lean into the power of curiosity and just take a step back and start asking some deep questions, like the one I like to ask is, assuming this is happening for me and not to me, what is the learning here? And that completely changes the relationship with the event. Questions like, what am I missing? Who can help? And again, reaching out. One of my big problems was, and this is, I went to boarding school at a very young age, and I have suffered from something called boarding school syndrome for most of my adult life. One of the characteristics of that is having a survival strategy where there is pride and endurance, never ask for help, survive on your own. Does it sound familiar? Yeah.
Well, we talked about it, right? I came from East Germany at the age of 13, before the wall came down. So I had to, in a teenage age where you went to puberty, and then you're starting to look up after girls for the first time, not with like, more like with a, so I came from East Germany. I had a dialect. I moved to Hamburg, which is a northern city in Germany. It's very, it's very traditional also. It took me years to fully integrate and to feel like a member of the society I was new in. I think I was like, took me 10 years or something. You don't know it in the moment, but then later on, when you get more curious about who you are, why you do what you do, and you reflect on that stuff, then you're going to figure that out. And that's all absolutely okay. That's the journey of life, right? And there's no one to blame, and especially not yourself is not to blame for it, right? And there's the other thing that I experienced. There was a thing I wrote about it a week ago. So I wasn't this time, I was like 15 or 16. And my grades were, let's say, had space for improvement. And my teacher was sitting with my parents one day and said, like, your son is one of the laziest students I ever had. So my parents came back home to me and told me that. And obviously I felt guilt and I felt ashamed. And I carried that on for years. I mean, I finished high school, I finished university. Anyway, so I finished it. But this the thing was with me for ages. I was like, I'm a lazy student. And then a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to someone who is just a brilliant soul, a wonderful human being, who pointed it out to me and said, like, you know that you went to a very transformative time as a teenager. This is not a normal thing as a teenager. So then you had to find, you know, that these conversations with others will give you even years later a totally new frame and perspective about yourself, where it's not about shame or embarrassment, where it is the story of rising, the story of overcoming these obstacles and succeeding. And that gives you a different picture and a different frame about yourself.
You're so right. And what you're talking about there obviously is the power of story and human story, which right now is so important. I mean, we obviously met on LinkedIn, and a lot of what's happening on LinkedIn right now is I think the balance of content has shifted from an overwhelming 90% business to probably there's a greater majority of people showing up and sharing their stories and their views. And I think that's a natural effect of what we're seeing globally right now. And it comes back to the point about uncertainty being the ruling principle. And when the external structures of all but collapse, what we're left with ourselves and our own human stories. And that goes all the way back. It's ancestral. I mean, that goes back all the way back to when we used to paint on cave walls and things. And there's a lovely quote by somebody, I think is a guy called Michael Mead. He's a mythologist, someone that I follow. And he said that a story will give to each person precisely what that person's soul needs. And that it's not for us to know what they take. It's just for us to have the courage to share our stories. And I just love that, because it kind of really frames what's happening right now. And I have a call that I do with people, just a complimentary thing, which is kind of unpacking the power of your story and just using the structure of mythology, which is just my thing, which is all around initiation, which is separation, which you were talking about earlier, liminality, where we have to kind of relearn paradigms and rules of what we thought was important, and then are coming back into the community with all that learning. And by putting that framework onto any story or any adversity you've been through, you suddenly realize exactly what you were just talking about. That's the rise, that's the value and the growth. And it's suddenly, for people that have gone through quite cataclysmic traumatic events, it suddenly starts to give them a fresh perspective to go, wow, gosh, I'd never seen that. That's the side of it. That was the story. That was my initiation, and that's my genius. And we're getting a little bit into Jungian now, that our greatest wound is hiding our greatest genius. But so I want to go on to, I was really interested about your career journey, because you've obviously been at a very senior position globally in terms of your content strategy and your content speciality. Over the last kind of couple of years, certainly over the last 12 months, how have you, and just again perhaps through the lens of resilience, you're somebody that exemplifies, I think, storytelling and generosity with your content on LinkedIn. How have you kind of approached the last few months in terms of keeping your momentum going up, keeping your spirit of generosity and curiosity moving forward?
I think it's the result of 10 months working myself out. Not working myself out to do workouts, but I had a pretty rough 2020, to be honest. There were a lot of things. I mean, as you said, I was 20 years in corporate life. There are coming upsides and downsides with it. But when you're 20 years in one company, you're somehow related to your job title. It's somehow your outside. You think your outside credibility comes from that as well. So it becomes less about yourself as a human. It's more about the job or the role that you fulfill. Not for everyone, but that's how I approached it. And obviously, if that's going to be stripped away from you, and I divorced 8 years ago. And so I don't have the immediate family setups on my own. So the first couple of months, I think that's quite human, is for people when it happens, is you're getting into a kind of embarrassment stage because you don't want to talk to people about it because it's a bit uncomfortable. Because as you know, when you approach these kind of topic also quite open to other people, it triggers their own fears as well. That are what I have figured out when I spoke very openly to people about how this isn't the moment, about the uncertainty, about what it makes with me emotional. I could see there are two types of personalities: one who are really diving into it with you, and other ones who are triggered by the story and their own fears triggered, and they step back because they don't want to deal with that. And then I until summer last year, I was really just like hanging in this kind of very foggy world where I didn't know exactly what's going to happen next, and also where I didn't really understood what I want to do next. On top, then you had this whole pandemic thing, right? That was just like, obviously that was not on my radar or anyone else's. And then just by fall, things kicked in a way like I got tired of being tired. I got tired of being just like, what do I do? What do I do? Of being concerned, of being embarrassed about things. And I started to talk more and more to people in my environment. I reached out to a few people that I knew from the past. It was I think that sometimes also overcoming your own fear of talking about, also the fear of getting rejected. So this thing like, what if I reach out, and I still have that from time to time. What if I reach out and I get rejected? By the way, it happened to me, and I'm still alive. So for everyone who has this fear, you're not going to die from it. It's all right. And then I met some truly incredible people through this outreach in October, November, who inspired me to explore my own talents and my own the things that I enjoy most again. That's like going out and telling stories and communicating with people and helping people. And as you may know, when you make there's very little moment where it just makes this, right? So where all the months before that feel like they will never end, that feel like it's always be like that. And then sometimes it's like a switch. It maybe takes a couple of weeks of talking and preparation, but then it was like for me, and I can tell you it was Christmas for me. I was with my daughter, and it switched. And then I started to get very, very active by January. And as you know, when you do that, and when you are human and you put yourself out there, I was overwhelmed by what happened in the last 6 weeks. It's just and what you have described about LinkedIn, but I also believe that over the last year, many of us have been on the journey. There's a trigger for more humanity, for more outreach, for more support along a lot of humans, and it's overwhelming how positive it was in the last 6 weeks. And as you know, as more positive experience you are making, as more you want to give back. At least that's how I am.
Amazing. And again, you've just described that journey, that hero's journey perfectly. You've had the isolation, separation, then it all got foggy, everything fell apart. But then through that process of reconnecting, you kind of raised up at a different level and have come back out, and and you're doing what you're doing today, which is fabulous. And you're right. I think a lot of people are going through the same thing. And I also like to encourage people to consider that this is happening globally. These 3 periods, and they're not all different narratives. Brexit, the social justice movement, the war on truth, the contemporary slavery of technology. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. It's all a kind of a collapse and renewal, and that's kind of an ancient Greek thing. So thanks for sharing that. So where are you right now? Are you in a sort of a fairly good place? Have you got kind of, because what felt like for me came up then is you kind of got a renewed level of sort of commitment to yourself in terms of what you're doing and what your intentions are. And
this is not only what happened to me this time. I told you that I had a few kind of situations in the past, over the past 10, 15 years were like that. What I've experienced each time is I got out, as I said, out of it better. Doesn't mean perfect, but I think what happened to me is I with each time I'm getting closer to myself in a way that I'm okay with who I am. As you know, I mean, I can be sometimes quite talk a lot, and also a bit of a loudmouth in terms like using a swear from time to time, but that's me, and I'm okay with that. And if people are not okay with that, that's absolutely also all right. But I think that this when those things happening to you, where you really fail, and where you have to reconfigure yourself, I think each time you're getting closer to yourself, and that's the whole learning part of. And that's part of also what I think, what you described as the curiosity, to understand who am I? And this is not something that happens within a couple of months. That's part of all the experiences you have along your life, the people you met, the crises you overcome. So for me, it's I think a good friend of mine who knows me for 15 years talked to me on Friday about it after a long time. And she mostly saw stuff on LinkedIn, but she sat me down 4 years ago. I remember that, where I was already in a place where I was not very happy in many occasions. And she said to me, like, mate, when I met you, you were like 30, 32, and you were this happy, bright guy with a smile, and you were telling stories, and you were doing this, and now what the heck do you want to do with your life? I mean, it's not who you are. I remember I was in the airport in Hamburg, and I drove back, and I was just like, that was not what I needed. But I knew intentionally it was true.
Or maybe it was what you needed. Just you hadn't had time to.
It was part of it. It took
process it. Yeah.
It still took 3 years after that, right? That's also what you have to have in mind. That's not a. And she called me on Friday, and she said, I saw the stuff you're doing right now. I see right now that's the guy I met when he was 32, and that's how I feel. I'm in a very, very good spot. I'm very happy about who I am and where I am at the moment.
Excellent. I love that. I want to pick up on you mentioned the control at the beginning of the conversation, that establishing and holding a level of self-control in the face of so much uncertainty can be quite challenging for people. So when we first spoke last week, you were helping me with that turbulence audit tool that I was putting together, which is actually falls under the control part of teaching and coaching resilience. What advice would you give? So we had a really good chat. I mean, and you helped me enormously really flesh out that process. And I've had about 6 or 7 more, and the same feedback has been quite consistent. But what advice would you give to people out there at the moment that are struggling to control their response to what's going on around them right now? How would you, what advice would you offer?
First advice, that's totally okay, because that's how we all feel. And that's what I tell people. I mean, I've spoken to multiple people the last couple of weeks from every part of the world, and it's everywhere the same. It's a certain feel of that you're losing control. And that's okay, because that's what it is at the moment. So the first thing we shouldn't do is to pretend you could gain control over stuff you actually can't control, because you're putting so much effort and energy into something that will need to know it can. So there is stuff with the pandemic. There is stuff with the economy that is suffering. There is stuff with what you have said with racial injustice. There are bigger things that you really can't control. You still can worry about it. You still can care about it, and that's rightfully so. But you will not control the final outcome in a way that you wish you could. And that's the worry and the uncertainty is going to be part of your life, and you have to accept it no matter what. It's hard to do so, but I think you have to. And for me, what was important is when I got back to a point where I was like, look, okay, what can I control? What is really in my control? And to be honest, when I had a rough time, you start with little things. You give your day a structure. You get out of bed, right? You get out of bed. You go outside. You go for a walk. This sounds silly, but it's especially in times where we're all in lockdown, especially in times where it's so easy to say, like, you know what, I'm gonna get a bag of chips, a can of beer, and I'm gonna watch Netflix for the next 28 years, and the world, you know what. So that was really important to me, because when that happened, and that's where I felt I have control back in a way, because I saw, okay, I want to do that, I can do that, and that's the outcome. And that's the little steps. And I think what's also important in those times of crisis is to give yourself some realistic goals, right? Don't reach for the stars right now. I spoke to a beautiful young guy a couple of weeks ago in Canada who is in this period of finding out what he wants to do with his life. And he talked to me about that he struggles with the fact that he doesn't have this big vision like Steve Jobs at the moment, that he doesn't. And I said, mate, you're 26, you're in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, there is nothing where you have to have a vision right now at the moment, because that alone is already a once in a lifetime thing. I mean, that's also because we have these huge idols hanging in front of us, right? The Bezos, the Elon Musk of the world. And it's okay to strive to be like that, but the pressure that is on every human, because they see that to be extraordinary and doing something outblownly great with your life, is just creating so much pressure as well. Talk about young kids, social media, and Instagram. What the heck, right?
I know. Oh, exactly.
Now my daughter's turning 17, and thanks God she's not so much drawn into it. But it creates all these kind of pressures on top.
Yeah.
And that you feel like if you're struggling with in life, you're a total failure.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, my daughter's 9, and she's very much into it. Unfortunately, she's very much the TikTok generation and this new thing, the kind of the fidget, the trading fidgets, you know, and like I sit down and play when we trade, you know, she goes and buys the latest. I sometimes wonder, is this just a fad, like yo-yos or frisbees and things that we went through, or is this a symptom of the anxiety generation, because these kids aren't being allowed out to express themselves physically? Is this a part of that? And it kind of worries me slightly.
I think the effect we're going to see on our kids is still to come. I mean, I don't know. It's very difficult, I guess. Also depends on how families are structured. You know that, but I mean, this is a generation who lost big moments, graduations, birthdays, hanging out with their friends, maybe holidays, all the stuff that you and I have experienced and look back right now as things we learn from. So it's also the question of how we as a society and as parents are helping them to regain some sense of normality after all of this. So this is a totally different topic.
I agree.
All right.
I agree. I mean, we're quite lucky in Sweden because life has gone on relatively normal. I mean, whether or not that's the right approach, only time will tell. So my daughter still gets to go to school. She's still out. It's a very active lifestyle here, but you're right. It is a challenge. And I think the implications of what we've all been going through, particularly for teenagers and young kids, will probably surface in the next sort of 12 to 24 months.
And I think also, to be honest, this is a role for parents. I mean, I had also my understanding about who I am as a father has changed over the last 15 years so enormously.
Yeah.
But I think that there is obviously this kind of old model that I think we have experienced as kids, right? There was this authoritarian kind of, and that's okay. It's just was, right? There was the father or the mother, and for me, when I became a father, I just wanted to be I wanted to have a relationship with my kid where I can be the first person she wants to talk to when she's struggling, right? And thanks God, I mean, it was a lot of time and a lot of work we put into it, but that's the fact to this. But we need to listen to our kids. We can't, even though that we are right now in a very, very difficult spot in our own lives, at work or whatever we have, but we need to listen to them at the moment.
They need
what's sorted out for yourself. Daddy has enough to do, this kind of stuff.
You're right, and it's something I talked about recently. I forget where it was, about the importance of, particularly because we're all working from home, the importance of being disciplined to decide in the morning when the day is done and let go of that work energy so that you can go into the next room and back into sort of the sacred spaces that home used to represent and be present with your children, and not, because otherwise you're just on 24/7. So, and I'm used to be quite guilty of this, and I'm working really hard at it. I can literally come off a work call or a coaching call and just step up, walk next door, back into the domestic family environment, but still have that kind of that work energy. And that's no way to be around a child. So I do a couple of exercises now where it sounds a bit sort of perhaps overcommitted, but I literally spend 5 minutes where I just kind of relax and kind of short meditation. And I consciously release all the tension in my body and everything in my body, and just set the intention for how I want to go and be. And it really helps just create that separation, and then allow me to go back in and be dad and be fun and have the, you know, and be the playful father that she needs. And it becomes down to presence. You know, children need our presence. They need our attention and our focus. And that's, for me, the thing that I'm trying to protect right now. So you raised a really good point. And also, I just wanted to go back with that chat that you met about these kids getting hung up on having a great big grand kind of purpose in life, which, yes, I mean, that's a great thing if you're lucky enough to naturally have one of those. But right now, my advice to people is just live purposely every day, day by day. Just wake up and just decide to your purpose right now is whatever lights you up. That's it. Do that day in, day out.
I had exactly that conversation on Sunday with my daughter, where I said to her, like, look, because we talked about it a little bit, and she said, well, and I don't know, I feel at the moment I'm not very productive and I'm not doing a lot. And I said, well, you're living in a pandemic. Whatever you at the moment can do to make yourself happy and to have some fun and some laughter, just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's why I always told her I'm one of the best examples that things, you can figure things out on the way. When I was young, when I was 22, I never imagined I would be living in another country or do what I have done for work or what I'm doing here right now. You know, you figure things out on the way. As you said, if you have a great purpose in mind, great. But not everyone in this age can be a Greta. And that's okay. That is okay. Exactly. And you don't need to be a super influencer. Your major purpose in life should be to find your spot in life, to find what you enjoy, what your values are, and live by it and enjoy it. That's it.
That's the power of authenticity. It really is to go deep, walk through the fear, be guided through the fear, find who you really are, and bring that to the world. Because I mean, everybody, I mean, we all, you know, every human comes inherited the gifts of the soul, and they are constructed and made up for each person as, you know, according to who they are as someone. And I think for me, that's the most powerful thing. And there's a quote on my LinkedIn profile, a joke by Joseph Campbell, is that the greatest privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. You know, he wrote that back in the 60s, and I kind of read that every day when I go onto LinkedIn. And it's a good reminder for me that it's a privilege, in terms of, it's a privilege on three levels. A privilege because I have my freedom and I live in a culture and a country where I have the ability and the space to do that, where millions and millions of people just don't even have the opportunity. Obviously, they do in their minds, but they're constrained politically. It's a privilege in terms of the energy and the freedom and the lightness and the confidence that it gives me. And I'm still doing a lot of work. My background is one of extremely low self-esteem, a deep fear of being judged and being ridiculed by people. And my journey is to be and work through that. And then the final privilege is the privilege of actually, by doing that, giving people the permission, not that they need it, but giving them the permission and the inspiration to do it for themselves. And those two things are really important. So I kind of love that insight that you shared about your daughter. It's just be who you are. What lights you up, that's your purpose right now. And everything else will fall into place.
And for me, it's what you described as one of the things that I experienced over the last years, but especially over the last couple of months. When you open yourself up, and again, you know, I'm getting very personal on some of my LinkedIn stuff, and some people don't like it. That's okay, right? But what I've experienced is when you do that and you start an open conversation with other people, the thought that you have that you are alone with this kind of stuff will disappear quite quickly, because if people share openly who they are and what they have been through, and what you will understand, all of the stuff we are going through is not unique. A lot of people are like this. And when you talk to people about the stuff you want to do, and what I do from time to time, is just when you create these safe zone where both feel like they have this safety net where they can talk about this kind of stuff. It helps you so enormously, because it takes away these uniqueness of struggle and pain that you feel for yourself and think no one else has it and no one else can understand it. And you even then understand there are people who are struggling even more than you. And then, you know, it gives you all a very nice perspective. And what you have said is, what I really think is absolutely true. When you come to that point where you are closer to who you are, I'm not quite sure if you ever will be fully there. I mean, because life is a long experience and journey. But if you're getting closer to that, what's happening is you're reaching an inner calm.
Yeah, exactly.
You're reaching exactly that, right? Because you come to a point where you're like, you know what should happen? You know, I'm okay with myself.
Yeah.
So I know based on what I've experienced in the past, there will be a way. I will find a way. And you don't freak out, and you don't need to also to escape into, I don't know, into things that some people obviously do, especially in times of crisis, where, I mean, you look at stuff about drug abuse, about violence at home, all this kind of horrible things, right? You don't need to escape in those places because you're calm with yourself, you're good.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, addiction, and it's one of the classic self-esteem shields that people use, is just to escape. And often those people, and again, this goes back to a little bit sort of Jungian psychology, but those people are often the ones that are closest to their deepest gifts, and they're just terrified by them. And, you know, once you've found that gift, you've also found that wound. And when you inflate that up, they would both have to grow in size, and sometimes it can just be too much for people. And it always, you know, we have these conversations, Michael, and it all just seems so simple, doesn't it, when we talk about it? And that you ask yourself that if everyone knows at a conscious level and theoretically how powerful and freeing and light and confident it is to be your truth self, why is it so hard and so fearful for people to step on that journey? And it's a question that I ask myself all the time.
The journey is long and painful, as you may know, right? It's not that you do that. It's not you're reading a book about, let's say, emotional availability or vulnerability, and you watch the Brené Brown video a few times, even though it's fantastic and her books are fantastic.
Yeah.
But it's like with many things in life, there is a journey from identifying a problem or creating some self-awareness and self-reflection about what's going on, trying to understand what you are dealing with, but then to take actions on it is fearful. And I mean, it's as I said to you, I'm a big fan of reaching out for help, and I have done that over the years when things occurred in my life that were a bit shaky or shaking, and where I wanted to figure out why I acted in the past, the way I acted, why I did this, and I really that's this curiosity about myself to understand why did I do that. But it's, for me, I mean, I'm 45 years old. It's a 25-30-year long journey, right? It's not something you're going to figure out in 6 months.
Yeah.
In this moment, there can be enormous amount of pain, because there, as you said, there are wounds coming up that you have bottled down, but they are still there. And I guess people are just scared about that pain, but it's part of it, and it's also, I think it's a healing part of it. And I said to someone, one of the reasons why I'm so openly about my stuff is because I'm okay with it, and I didn't die from it. And I would love to encourage other people to go there.
And you understand the power of story, and you understand by sharing your story, somebody somewhere will take one bit and go, that's me. Yeah. So if he's done it,
we're all in different stages of life, right? Yeah. Everyone is somewhere else. But yeah, so to give people this kind of an open version of myself, and tell them, like, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. That's very important for me.
Yeah, exactly. I was getting, like, I mean, what kind of percolated up in my head when you were talking about that is this concept of fearlessness as well. I mean, you know, that's something that really interests me when you see people, you know, the bravest people out there, that they seem that they've got very high levels of fearlessness. And I was talking about this to someone the other day, and the interesting thing about fearlessness is that popular description would have us believe it's the absence of fear, but then there's never the absence of fear. Fear is always there. Fearlessness is just somebody who's developed and cultivated a cooperative and healthy relationship with fear, and sees it as a guide and as a way through to the things that they want. Absolutely.
I tell you, that's what I was struggling when you used the word fearlessness, because I think that there's nothing like this, right? We all have fears, we all have anxieties, and you can do these kind of things and develop and be good with it. You always have come, and these moments can be a minute, I had a big thing on Sunday, right? It's just like I felt in a good spot, woke up on Sunday and did some work, and then out of it, right? I couldn't even explain it. It was just there. So I took myself out for a walk and cleared my head a little bit. So I think also the awareness that this is coming up will come up, but also create some tools around it for yourself. What you can do when it comes up, right? That can be affirmations, that can be some paperwork you can do where you put like, this is what I actually think, and that's what actually the reality is, so that you can put it together when the fear pops in. That's important. It's really important to understand this will happening, that the fear will come up, the anxiety will come up at some point, but to understand how do I going to deal with it, and not that I'm going to freeze and
Yeah, exactly. It's like you said, having that kind of tools, and you're the only way, a system, a personal system that helps you work through that. And that will be different for everybody. There is no one right. I mean, I know people that just don't believe in the power of affirmations whatsoever, but they're very good at getting into nature and recharging off being in the forests or whatever. So
Ozzy say, whatever floats your boat.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
I mean, pick something that's good for you, and there is no rule book what you have to do. And again, I mean, it's just like one of the things that were really important for me, and I really needed to understand. I really understood it very, very late, that self-care is nothing selfish.
No, God, I know.
It's one of the most important things that I have learned in life, because I came from a background where doing something for yourself was seen as a bit like, why you're spending money on yourself, for example, or why do you going to a coach, or why do you are paying someone else to it's just it was just a concept that was not in my mind. And to understand that if I'm not good with myself, if I'm not mentally healthy, if I'm not physically okay, I'm not for great use for the people around me. Right? It's just like I can't be the best person for them if I'm just not good with myself, and if I don't look after myself. So that's really important, that for everyone also, that it is okay to invest in yourself. It is okay to take time with a coach. It's not even okay. I highly recommend it. It's me. I mean, I'd rather spend some money that I saved on a coach or on some of the things than go on a holiday. I mean, everyone is different, fair enough. But I think for me, I get more value out of that. And I think that's a very important message to everyone. Look after yourself first. It's not selfish. It's the best thing.
It could come across as slightly manipulative and self-serving to completely agree with that. But I completely agree with you. I think, and I started investing in myself through that lens of self-care back in, I think, 2005. Before then, I was your quintessential, just sort of London. I was completely asleep. There was not an element of me that was awake at all. And I suddenly had a moment of clarity, and just started the whole journey I'm on now, and started investing in myself. And I have never looked back. But it's so important. I think there's a natural collective acceptance of that now, which is why the private coaching industry has exploded for the last 18 months, as people are realizing.
That's the whole thing. That's maybe what you would think. That's the first thing that people cut out, right?
Yeah.
It's the first thing what you think, people looking for the essentials. So they're going to think that that's the fancy yada yada stuff for the good times. That's exactly, I heard it from another person as well. Yeah. This is exactly the time where you need to invest into yourself, and where you need to make sure that you get through that healthy and safely. Yeah. And I think, as I've told you, for me, just the first step where things became better, and I was able to see some light, and sometimes is when I started to talk to people. I mean, I'm really, really blessed, because I have a wonderful network of friends and family who were there for me, even though that I couldn't see it at some point at the beginning. But then also later on with guys like you and other people I just connect with over the last couple of months. And it was my coach that I had last year and this year. This is this kind of connection. That's something we need, especially in times like this.
I think the key word there as well, perhaps in closing, because I'm just conscious of time, is that word invest. And to remember that type of investment, whether it's in a coach or a therapist, or whether you go and have a Reiki treatment or a massage, if you're going into with the right intention and you do see it as an investment with an upside, you know, you're going to reap those benefits. And particularly through coaching, what I've found, and this is my experience working with my own coach as well for the last couple of years, is the benefits and the implications of the work that we do together only really become visible and tangible a long time after we've done the work. So I'm still seeing the benefits of coaching that I had 2 years ago. And it's something that you don't realize when you're in the moment, because you're in the moment and typically, you know, delayed gratification, you're looking for quick results. You want immediacy. We all do, and that's understandable. But I had something happen the other day, and it's just a process that I went through with a coach a couple of years ago came up, and I was like, oh my, yeah. I mean, that's wow, you know, and that in itself was such a valuable insight, you know.
I still picked up stuff last year that came up in my first therapy like 8 years ago, right? It's like, oops, I thought I dealt with them already, right?
Yeah.
Apparently not. So it's a lifelong thing. And but as you have said, I think if you are curious about yourself, if you are able to gain a little bit of control over the things you can control, and if you then reach out and build connection, not only with others, but also with yourself, build a connection with yourself.
Yeah.
You're going to reach at some point the stage of calm that leads you into a much better place and makes life so much more enjoyable.
Yeah. I love that you finished with that. I mean, INNER-CALN is obviously my entire platform, and it's just, I'm such a big believer in the power of calm. Not in that state of being. I mean, we can all access that state through meditation or going for a walk or breathing, whatever, but it's kind of pursuing it as a way of being, of building that kind of inner place. You've always got a soft landing. It's not about kind of living in a sedentary level vanilla lifestyle. It's about being able to go out into the world and go slide up and down emotional experiences, but knowing that at any point in time, you have the self-awareness and the control to soft land and get back into the game. And that's the key. That's the key.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
Michael, can't tell you how much I've enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you so much.
Good, huh? I enjoyed it.
Really good, mate. Thanks for taking the time.
You're more than welcome.